Because Money is supported by Patreon. Since our launch a couple of weeks ago, we are slowly building up a small army of patrons. We're not quite at the world domination stage yet, but we're getting there, and we are incredibly grateful to anybody who's taken the time to check out the page and even consider giving us a few bucks. If you're interested in learning more, you can check us out at patreon.com/becausemoney and support the work that we're doing here. All right, so this week you get to be a fly on the wall in a conversation that Sandy and John and I had with David O'Leary from kindwealth.ca. David shared a ton of stuff which is still kind of rocking around in my brain. I can't get it out of there, about impact investing and the lessons that he learned by going bankrupt when the internet bubble crashed, and the things that he's learned from being an analyst at Morningstar. He's just been everywhere. He's got a ton of experience, and he's bringing all that to kind of bear in a really interesting way in making this new practice at Kind Wealth. So we talk about all of that, but I won't get ahead of myself. I'll let him tell it because he tells it way better than I do. So here's David, and this is him starting off by telling us how he got into finance to begin with.
So I started my career as came out of high school thinking I would be a teacher. I came from a family of teachers, and I thought, well, I did well in English literature, so that's what I'll study, and then I'll go become a high school English teacher and coach some football, and that'll be a lot of fun. And I started working at a bank in my final year of grade 13, OAC, when that was around still. And so literally one of my friend's mom, one of my friend's mom worked at the bank, and he literally got all of us jobs. And so all of my friends worked at across a number of branches in Etobicoke. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a really cool place to work, and it paid really well relative to all the other jobs I had at my disposal at the time. And so I just started taking some industry courses, like the Ethic Mutual Funds license and just some bank courses and things like that. And I one of my other friends was really interested in investing in the stock market and learning about derivatives. And I remember sitting down over coffee and talking about the futures market and how crazy it was. And, you could make an investment and, just end up with a delivery of, pork bellies on your, on your front driveway, theoretically, right? And this is like late 1999 now. So this is 1998, 1999. And it's the tail end of the the Clinton years and the bull market of the 90s and the peak of the internet bubble. And so that time credit was real fast and loose. The banks, I remember, you could get your friends a credit card for $10,000 limit credit card, gold MasterCard, for like your 19-year-old friends who don't have a job, right? And so all our friends had gold MasterCards, and the bank was really loose with credit. And so what I noticed at the time was the bank was, what would happen is anybody who came in and opened up a business account would get if they had a good credit bureau, the bank would go through and do an automatic credit check, and kind of 3-4 months later, they may send a letter. It was done automatic at a head office. It's kind of an automated system that did this, and they send you approval for a line of credit for $15,000 to help you with your cash flow for your business. So recognizing this, I realized, wow, well, this is interesting, and I'm investing at the time in the markets and doing very, very well. You couldn't go wrong at the time. Anything you bought was going up. You just felt like you couldn't go wrong. And so little knowledge is a dangerous thing, right? And so and credit's loose. So I realized these bank accounts, if you opened up a business account, you could get pre-approved for this line of credit. So I went downtown and I registered a sole proprietor business and filled out registered a business and opened up an account. And sure enough, 3 months later, I'm a 21-year-old kid who's got a sole proprietor business, and like it's all legit. Like I opened it up with the bank. They know that I'm an employee. And sure enough, 3-4 months later, I got my first letter saying, hey, you've been pre-approved for a $15,000 line of credit. So great. Why not take that money and invest? And so I'm studying I'm studying English literature at the time. I have the IFIC mutual funds course under my belt, and that's it. Like that's the extent of my investment knowledge. And so you get the first line of credit and invest, and things are going well, and then just realized, hey, like why don't I do this again? And so let's register another business. And so this is now, kind of mid 1990. I can't remember what month it is at the time, but like in retrospect, like this is Amazon was born and Google was born, and like this is like Steve Jobs had come back to Apple and like resuscitated, took the rose it from the ashes. Like this is the time period we're going through, right? And so I ended up doing that numerous times over, and the story is headed right. So, because I'm not investing in, actually, interestingly, to my credit, I had a sort of I was playing with a lot of different things. So I had like a kind of a dogs of the Dow strategy where I'm kind of buying some of so Bethlehem Steel, for instance, was a Dow component that went bankrupt, right? Because the economy changed. And that's one that I held. I had a whole bunch of small stocks as well, like these dog shit, penny stocks that are going bankrupt once the bubble bursts, and then playing a lot with options, so like writing call options for the premiums, and then buying naked call options, and by the way, I'm taking this borrowed money now, these lines of credit, and putting it into a discount brokerage account, and I'm in a margin account, so I'm now leveraging on borrowed money.
I have to say that
with options,
John, I don't know if you covered that in any of your book. I don't remember any of this.
Is that a strategy
from the book? Is that in the second edition of Value of Simple? You're gonna.
Yeah, I'll have to build it back in. Yeah. I mean,
this is only funny.
People bring up a lot is like, well, I mean, if I'm investing, I can't really leverage as much as if I go and get a rental house. So.
Right.
This is only funny because we're 20 years in the future.
Oh, right.
Okay, so you got your margin account that's based on the line of credits from your multiple sole proprietors.
Right. Yeah. And then I'm trading options.
And you're trading options.
Mm-hmm. Right. So as much leverage as, I guess I could have levered up a little further with futures, but so yeah, about as levered as you can get. Leverage on top of leverage, and sure enough, the bubble bursts. And the bubble doesn't burst like overnight. It bursts over kind of like it's a series of like collapses and then resuscitations, and then over the course of kind of 9, 10, 11 months, it kind of bottoms out. And yeah, it's easily the most stressful period of my life. It was just absolutely awful. I mean, it was so there's all you're at work and you're at school and you're just following the markets every single day, watching minute after minute as stocks and your mood is fluctuating with the markets, right? So some days and there's a bounce back. Oh, okay, I think I can move some money around and keep covering my payments. And then the bottom falls out again, and you're just trying to come to terms with all this. And so so that all happened over the course of 8-9 months, and at 20, I guess. I can't remember, was I 22 or 20? I must have been 22 at the time, or 23. I ended up claiming bankruptcy. I had about $250,000 worth of debt. Wow. For a 23-year-old kid who knew just enough about investing to get himself killed. The bankruptcy did what it was supposed to. So that was a very interesting experience because it gave a stupid kid a chance to not have this sort of debt hanging over their head. Despite the fact that it does literally just wipe away your debt, it is it's not. For me anyway. Maybe for other people, they would sort of use that callously as like, oh, this is great, a jail-free card. Yeah. No, for me, it was just a horrible experience. I wouldn't want it to go through. It served its purpose, and I learned my lesson.
It's such an interesting thing, and I don't know. It must have been really interesting for you too to kind of have all this practical experience in the market kind of pre-education. That's not the way, or maybe it is a story that people have, but it's not the way that I normally think about it. And so it's got to have been interesting to go through and learn the theory afterwards, just as, for however the experience worked out, you still had a lot of experience. You still had a lot of actual, so much of that theory is... It means something different when you're learning for the first time, and these are just things. But you had your hands in all of this, and then we're learning the theory afterwards. And I have to assume that that's just given you such an incredible perspective to talk to clients about, to actually have gone through that, all of those experiences. It gives you such a unique perspective.
Yeah, it is fundamentally. I don't know, just magnified my appreciation for risk. And I say appreciation because I'm not afraid of risk. I'm not gun shy now myself. I just have a much healthier respect for what can go wrong. And so, in all a lot of the stuff that I saw, like even like Bethlehem Steel was a great example of that, right? Like it wasn't just that I only owned these penny stocks. I also had some really big names. There was a bunch of biotech, like very large biotech companies that I was playing around with as well, and basically kind of basing it on what drugs do they have in the pipeline and where are they in the FDA approval process, and like, hey, if they get this approval, what happens? And you buy these companies where it's like widely expected that they're going to receive approval, and then it doesn't happen. Or you buy Bethlehem Steel and, oh, it's a Dow company. It's going to come back and it's just a matter of time. And you're buying this value stock and no, I'm buying a falling knife. Like I'm learning a lot of different lessons about risk. And so that now I just have a very, very healthy appreciation for, I know what are the odds that that happens? Listen, if it can go wrong, it will. You have to protect yourself.
I'm curious just because that experience, we're talking about where we are right now. We've had a bull market that's gone on for quite some time, and there's quite a few investors I'm sure that have only experienced that kind of growth that you were talking about. You experienced when you're in your early 20s. It's just like you're betting on this and it's going up and everything's going great. How would you talk to somebody who's kind of in that position now, or how do you talk to investors that have kind of had that experience in a bubble now and haven't had that more? They haven't experienced lots of forms of the market. Kind of, what do you say to them to try to broaden that out?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask. I published an article probably a couple months ago called, Millennials, Why You're Not Prepared for kind of the next market crash. And it's essentially paralleling, like I think they're kind of in a very similar situation to I was. I started to learn about investing and just came to the point where I had even a small amount of money to actually put into the markets at a time at the tail end of a 10-year bear market where like everything's great. Everything's great. You don't have any trouble finding work. You don't have any trouble, earning income. You don't have any, everything you invest in is going up. And I don't think the market has such obvious places of like, outrageously overvalued stocks. Like the internet bubble was like this very narrow space that was just everything was doing amazing, but the general market, like even just the working condition, like the access to access to credit is like their whole adult lives. Access to credit's been just and so it's not their. So I kind of in the article, it's not meant to be patronizing. It's not like, oh, you don't know, you're so. It's just like, no, you haven't had a chance to experience anything else. I was there too, and so like when the music stops, you just can't even imagine that the world can be so dramatically different than what you're used to because it's all you've ever known. And so I kind of lay out this kind of case and then sort of give some tips for, kind of how to avoid it. So like the boring stuff like diversification, but even things like, this was my favorite sort of tip from it is 5 sort of tips. And one of them was like, start a side hustle, like have a job on the side, like do your own thing, create a side income. And like, guess what? If you lose your job because the economy tanks, and we go into a recession, maybe the side business is some sort of business that's still earning an income, right? Like maybe it's insulated, maybe not, but at worst case, you're going to get another experience. If it takes off, great. It may be another source of income. Like it gives you this option so that you're not, even psychologically, you're not now devastated that your sole source of income is now gone. You've got options. You've been thinking about other things. You've sparked an entrepreneurial mindset. So anyway, that was just sort of a fun additional one. But
even just trying something new reminds you that you can try something new. So whether or not the thing that you tried works, the fact that you tried something means that you're more likely to say, okay, well, what can I do now? It's really hard. I used to think, because my background is fine arts, is like I used to think that it was just the fine arts that got that really laser focus and don't step out of your lane kind of thing. But it's every industry gets this, like, this is my identity, this is what I do, I can't step to the left or to the right. And of course you can. And getting past that identity issue and that psychological side of it is actually a big side of figuring out how to diversify yourself, however that kind of comes out on the bottom line.
I do think it's really interesting. And I don't know if there's research into this or how we could really kind of get a really broad spectrum of these experiences. But like, okay, I started my first real conception of what markets did and what was like kind of being current with what was happening was in 2000. I don't know that I want to say that number, 2004, 2005, like when I first started in banking. So when I started in banking, everything was a debt consolidation. And it was still recent enough, the 2001 bubble was recent enough that it wasn't like, oh, you can just put money in the markets and that's fine, you'll make lots of money. But like, so that window, whatever the specifics are, the window where you first start to be aware of what markets are and what they can do and the narrative around them must form you over time, because we talk about the sequence of returns you receive kind of leading up to and then during your portfolio withdrawal years as being really important to the ultimate sustainability and success of your portfolio through your retirement. But really what you bedrock believe about whether the markets are rigged because you remember 2008 and that window, those whatever 40 years of investing or 60 years of investing, everybody is starting from a different kind of ground level. I had this window into this part of the market. You know how you zoom in, you see like index charts and you look at like a 3 month and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. And then you zoom out and then you zoom out again and you see the 30-year and you're like, oh, that wasn't so crazy at all. But so people start with this little window, but they put that window in front of their eyes and they see everything through the lens of, oh, my first experience was this kind of horrible triple leveraged futures thing that I did, or whatever that might be, right? And I think that probably says a lot about somebody else, is you came out with a real appreciation for risk, but didn't shy away from it. I think a lot of people came out of the dominant narrative out of 2008 was all the millennials are just sitting in cash, right? I think a lot of people came out of their first experience not with an appreciation of risk, just a total fear of it. So I think that's really
right. It's fascinating. It would be really interesting. I think. Yeah, this is part of the kind wealth thing, and we've talked a little bit previously about kind of the financial life planning, bringing in the sort of the psychology and the value side of how you perceive money and what's valuable to you and how you relate to money. So this notion that like money should be unemotional and like it's math and it's nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense, and it's highly emotional. We've got all sorts of hang-ups around money and how we relate to it so radically differs from one person to the next based on lessons you received as a child and what your parents' views towards money were, and to Sandy's point about my very first experience investing in the markets and what that taught me. And of course
it's the same idea that we talk about all this time, this idea of your there's that Oxford, Cambridge, one of the smart English universities did that great study about your financial habits being really set in stone or really being formed by age 4 or 5. This is a great story, very scientific. I promise you the study exists. And the general sweep of it being like your first views of money, you're developing that relationship with money comes very early. And so we're constantly, this is the thing that if anybody's been in therapy, you're unpacking the things that you figured out as a kid when you figured out relationships with all these things. It's the same with money, but kind of going back to what Sandy's talking about, there's time frames within that idea of your first idea of investing. You're figuring out your relationship with this thing for the first time. So you do get that narrow window in the same way where you're setting these things. And I remember, as an overshare, my therapist talking about, here's the kid version of you. And he's doing what he needs to do in that situation. And he came up with coping mechanisms because he's a fantastic, adaptable, amazing human being. That's great. But if you keep using those 20 years later, they might not fit anymore. And so it's hard and interesting to say, okay, can we identify the patterns that you set when you were first developing your relationship with this thing, whether it's investing, whether it's money kind of at a base level, whatever kind of frame it is, and say, okay, do these apply to now? What do you keep? What's good? What's bad? But that identifying and then the kind of analyzing afterwards. But that unpacking it's really difficult. It's difficult in any part of your life. It's difficult if you're working through something emotional. It's difficult if you're working through something financial. It's hard to recognize. Then it's hard to say, okay, what do I like about that? What needs to change? What doesn't apply to right now, but may to in a similar situation?
Yeah, I think I like what you're saying about unpacking. I think that's exactly right, because you don't know why you don't even know that how you relate to money is different than other people necessarily. You may not be aware of it, and then once you are, just unpacking that and like understanding, well, wait a minute, what is it and why do I have those views? That's a whole process. I mean, this is an aside, but like even the kind of, I think you were saying it jokingly, but like an overshare about the therapist stuff, like the whole narrative around mental health, I think, is a big. These are tied up, so I'm going to digress a little bit. But like,
No.
it should just be perfectly normal to like, yeah, I have a therapist, of course. I go for like
Obviously.
an annual mental health checkup. Like I do a physical, and I wouldn't shy away at all from talking about like, yeah, I went for my physical. Like I wouldn't be embarrassed at all. That wouldn't be an overshare. But like, if you're going to talk to somebody about mental health, like we should all be doing that every single year, no matter how happy you are, how many well adjusted you are.
100%.
Just like, yeah, I went for my annual mental health checkup. Like, yeah, okay. Anyway, that's a different issue. But like, if we had less of those hangups, I think there'd be more people thinking about financial life planning and thinking about, oh yeah, like of course you'd want to marry kind of your hangups and your issues around money and discuss that as part of the planning process.
So I want to hear. So now, with all of that as the context,
Right.
I want to hear about David looking at like, okay, so I learned from that. You grew, and you're working at Morningstar, and you're kind of getting past the idea of I'm a financial professional and I went bankrupt, and then what?
So just to give you some context, I mean, Morningstar, my role there was I led a team of analysts. I started, there was just 2 of us. I grew to a team of 7. We were covering Canadian mutual funds. And so we would go in and write these reports and say these things, and we would grade companies, individual, like the whole company as a whole, RBC, TD, Fidelity, with letter grades, A, B, C, D, and F. They're called stewardship grades. And so our whole mantra was we're going to be an objective voice, and we're going to be that voice for the little investor who doesn't have the voice. Yeah, we did that for about 9 years in Toronto, and then I approached Morningstar about moving to South Africa to do the same thing for the South African market, and spent 4 years doing that there.
Cool.
Learning a whole new country and a whole new regulatory environment, and every single company was.
Can you rewind just a little bit? So it was like, you approached Morningstar. You were like, "Hey, I want to go to South Africa."
Right. Yeah.
Just like out of the blue.
Yeah. Well, so I got married, and my wife works in the nonprofit. She works for an NGO. She works a lot in West and East Africa, kind of out in villages, like the small.
You kind of
like
her.
Yeah.
Near
yeah.
her.
I fell in love with her, and yeah, she was okay, and. We got married, and we were trying living somewhere new, and particularly a developing country. And so I kind of like looked at Morningstar's offices across the globe and found a few developing countries and thought, hey, South Africa sounds great because it's Cape Town, which I don't know if you guys know anything about Cape Town, but it's like paradise. Yeah. So anyway, so I did that for 4 years. It was a really great learning experience. My wife and I had our daughter there, and then I was getting frustrated because Morningstar just wasn't investing in the market and giving me the resources that I needed to really grow it. And I think more than that, it was just I've been at Morningstar now for 13 years, doing the same thing. 2 different markets, but the same type of work. And I was just running out of steam. And so I was talking to some partners at the time about starting a financial advisory practice here back in Toronto. Both of them had been financial advisors their entire careers. I went to high school with both of them, and I was excited about, hey, I can get in front of investors now. Because at Morningstar, you're doing all this work, you're speaking up for the little guy, you're writing these reports, and you put them out, and it's like screaming into the void. You don't get anything back. You're not sitting in front of it. There's no client.
Yeah.
And so there's no feedback, and you don't know who's listening and who's not. And so I was like, it would be really amazing to like get back in front of and I was really interested in like, I hate to use the word because it's so overused, but I'm going to say it anyway and kick myself after, but disrupt the. So we did that for 1.5 years, and I think what we realized was we had very different views. Like they agreed they wanted to shake up things and do things different. The industry's kind of broken. But we had very different views, and mine was much more radical than theirs. And I think we realized that and sort of agreed to go our separate ways. And that was in March of this year. That all happened. So I got back from South Africa in 2015, July. Did that for 1.5 years with them, and then we agreed to go our separate ways. And that's when I started Kindwealth, where I've kind of abdicated myself from the investment selection process for the clients. I'm just doing fee only planning, and that is born out of my experience as a professional who evaluates money managers. It's really, really hard to beat the market. And the finance John in Burlington at RBC is not going to do it. He's not. And it doesn't matter
wouldn't
that.
be in Burlington.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, John.
Well, no, he's just he doesn't have any chance, right? It's hard for it's like Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio will do it, but no, John, you can't do it. Sorry. And the thing is, and none of them individual advisors don't ever measure they don't put together a coherent track record.
Yeah.
So you can never prove it, right?
Yeah.
And they don't ever have to prove it to themselves, and so they selectively look at they don't think they're doing anything wrong because they don't ever measure it. So they if you just if you ask somebody without them measuring it, I think I'm doing a good job, and they'll selectively remember their wins, like all of us do, human nature, right? And then suppress their losses or downplay them, and so they think that they're actually adding value, but they're I know that it's no, most of them are not. Maybe there are a few here and there that are, but no, most of them are not. That's just math, right? So just to give you some numbers. So Morningstar studies how good a job we do at evaluating which active money managers can beat the index.
Yeah.
But can we do it in advance of them actually? So how good we are predicting.
Okay.
And if you look across all of Morningstar's kind of fund researchers, and we do this there's 100 mutual fund analysts across the globe at Morningstar who did what we do in different countries, primarily Europe and North America, a little bit in Asia as well. And the success rates are kind of in the neighborhood of, depending on the study and the year and all that, but 50 to 60% of the time we get it right. So it's not bad. It's better than a coin toss. Marginally better than a coin toss, which if you add that up, even if it's 55%, it's better than not. You're still better off than had you not. But that's with a firm that has 3 decades of experience doing this, with people full time every day, all day, doing nothing but evaluating money managers, and that's your kind of upside. That's 50 to 60% of the time is good. So no, why would anybody else be able to do this? It's not worth the time and the effort people are spending on it. Go passive, have pay attention to the asset allocation, because 98% or 90% of returns are dictated by the asset allocation.
See, that's what John taught me in the investing book. That's the stuff. We finally got to your stuff, John. Eventually. Eventually.
I was wondering whether John was oh, this guy is completely contradicting me and I hate him, or
No. It is all about being passive and all about, not just the academic research about why passive is good, but also because from a real world perspective, all of the alternatives take a lot more work, whereas passive is okay, here's a decent model portfolio. It's got the elements I'm looking for. I'm going to tweak it however I have to suit my risk tolerance, and then you're off to the races, and you do it, and then you get back to working your day job and your side hustle.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you just remove a lot of unnecessary work from the equation. All that work for what? For the odds that you're likely going to underperform, or at best maybe marginally outperform after fees. It's just, why? And I know why. I know why financial advisors do it, because they can add in margin, right? They can justify, hey, you're paying me to do this additional thing that you're going to pay me to do.
But why? Is it the idea? Is it a bit like lottery ticket syndrome, where it's the idea that people still have the idea that even though most people won't, I could be the one to break the bank. I could be the one to be lucky. Is that the kind of mentality that people are bringing to it?
I guess it depends who you're asking about, the client or the advisor.
The client. I know exactly why the advisor does it. That makes total sense. They're doing
right.
I understand the motive.
The advisors don't even think they're doing anything wrong. They don't. They don't have a track record. They don't know how bad they're doing.
Yeah. And they unless they're really curious people, why would they go outside of what if they ever want to read anything about what the markets are going to do next week, they get a weekly report. There's a phone call. They can unless you break out of the little kind of bubble that your employment constructs for you, they think they're doing a super great job. When Managed Portfolio Service came out at CIBC, I was like, wow, it rebalances if it goes out of tolerance by 2.5%. That's so awesome.
Right.
I thought it was a cool thing. I didn't know any better.
Can I ask,
Yeah, right.
how long, I'm sorry, David, how long do how long is that going to be an excuse? Because I'm totally I don't believe that people who work in financial institutions have some malicious plan to trick people. Like I'm totally on the same page with you guys on that. But at a certain point, with the availability of knowledge and the availability to say, wait, we aren't tracking our performance. There is no way to prove what we're saying to clients that push those questions hard. Like, at what point do you say that not knowing is not an excuse for carrying the status quo forward?
But think about the person who's doing this job. So in many cases, this I'm talking about the retail level at the bank.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm talking about the person that I was. But you're not only an investment advisor for the most part. You're the person who also does the mortgages and opens the accounts and does the estate accounts if you're particularly unlucky. Like, you have all sorts of things that you do in any given day. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, it's no problem. You don't have any responsibility to kind of turn your eyes on and think about the wider implications. And then you go home and you have 2 kids at home and you got to pick one up at daycare and you're really sad that you have a kid in daycare. Of course, I'm telling my own story. And at the time, I really was already convinced that day 2, I was like, nah, I don't think banking is for me. And then 8 years later, I left. But it takes a certain amount of moxie to look at what you're doing and the environment upon which you have built your income, your financial stability. You probably have your own money invested there. Yeah. You have friends there, maybe if you make friends at work. I don't work at work. But there's a lot of reasons why it's much. I don't blame regular people who never really have aspirations to be anything more than the person behind the desk at their local bank branch, for not really they didn't read Wealthy Barber, or they didn't read Value of Simple, or they didn't really thought about it too hard.
No,
and
that's unfair.
Than that. Like, you have it's against your own financial interest, right? Like, you're a salaried employee of a bank
with a pension,
right? And so, no, your obligation is to the bank, right? Like, they're paying your bills. I actually do think that financial advisors and planners should not be paid by anybody but a client. Like, what does it come down to? Like, my loyalty going to be to the client who doesn't pay me, or the bank who does? Like, of course it's going to be the bank.
Yeah. So
it's against your own interest to be critical. I mean, you could then, then I'm going to quit my job and leave. But again, you're asking a lot of people. So all the incentives are the opposite way. As an aside, I think the banks. Sorry, John, I'll let you jump in.
Oh, sorry. Just going to say, and it's very easy to convince yourself that you're doing a good thing because you're helping the client, you're doing the financial planning for them, even if the financial planning is then all biased and skewed towards the products that you have available to sell them. You can convince yourself that you're doing the job of helping them, and this is just how you get paid. And so, the funds I sell are going to underperform the indexes, but I can tell myself the story that the client is going to be better off if they work with me, and then I put them in these funds, and then that's how I get paid, and then they're actually doing something.
And remember, these are people who are on their own. So if they are trying to construct a more realistic worldview, like you talking about the mutual funds underperforming the indexes, at the same time, what they are receiving is an unending volume. So banks are marketing not only to clients, they're also marketing to their employees. And it's in the bank's interest to make sure that there is an endless stream of counterfactual, in a way, but just oh, look, no, I mean, but they didn't look at this, or did you see the behavior gap? And did you know that people who work with a financial advisor are 2% more wealthy at the end, or whatever? Any of those things that the bank want you to kind of oh yeah, I guess, and I don't really have time to read any more of that anyway, so fine.
And it makes me feel good because I want to keep doing this. I'm getting paid well to do it. I'm comfortable.
Still, the thing that drives me crazy is the perception gap between what clients think they're getting when they go into a bank and what is being measured by the people that work at the bank. And that it drives me crazy because, if I go and buy a car, I know that salesman is being measured on how many cars they sell. I know that. And I know that, and they can be great and they can help me find a great car. But at the same time, I understand that their boss they care that they're being nice to me, but it's secondary.
And they're not there to solve your holistic transportation problem. You're not going to walk out of a car dealership and this walking in, that they're not going to walk out and say, yeah, bus pass,
Right.
bicycle.
Right. No, I'm there. They're selling. I'm going because I want to be sold a car.
Exactly. So it's the perception difference that drives me crazy, is because, somebody comes off the street and sits down in an office behind a desk there is a person who says, "I will help you with your money." And they say, "That is great. I need help." And they say, "I'm going to do it for free." And they say, "That's amazing."
Yeah.
And that's what they think is happening. And so that's the thing that drives me freaking up the wall. Is not, you do what you do. Banks don't change a thing. I don't care. The perception has to change. You can't sell one. Well, you can, because they are, and it's going very well. So you can completely do
not
it.
Suffering.
You shouldn't sell.
It's really frustrating, because that's the kind of thing where people think they're being helped, and people, like you're saying, think that they're really helping, and there are people that are helping. It's just,
of course.
It's so much more convoluted and complicated. And then the metrics, because metrics really matter when you're trying to make progress. When you're measuring how you do something, and if it's effective, if the bank and all the corporate structure behind that is measuring how can we sell most effectively, they're not helping their employees measure the other kind of effects. And we were talking about this the other day in the forum about like financial planning, when you're talking about the pure art of financial planning, more in a fee-only style where you're just with the client. How do you measure success? And it's very difficult, because there's a whole bunch of other metrics that you're bringing into it. You're talking about satisfaction and happiness and ooey gooey stuff, and how they use their money to create a life that they're satisfied with. Like these are hard things to figure out, but it's frustrating because we need to figure out metrics so that we know if it's working. And financial institutions are not working on metrics to help that kind of thing. And that's why this whole conversation that you brought up right from the beginning really matters, is what we measure matters. What we weigh and what we note matters, because it gives people the tool, employees, people that are doing this work, the ability to say, this is working, this is not. But if the goal is not the same, if you think, I'm trying to help this person, but all the metrics are going over here, you get exactly where you're talking about, David, where you're like, they think it's working, and objectively from the outside, you're like, well, it's not working in the way you think it is. Something else needs to be happening, but we don't have data, we don't have information, we don't have the tools to express that to them, we don't have the tools to completely express that to clients, and that's a major lack.
What's more is that the question is not, is it working? Like, I don't have any doubt that if somebody who knows nothing about investing says, am I better off going into my bank or just trying to guess and do it myself without any research? And I'm not like, I don't have any education, I'm not going to put any time and effort into it. No, definitely you go into the bank, you're going to be much better off. The question is, like, what are you paying, and what are the alternatives? It's like, so. And that's the question. So that's what the banks focus on is, oh no, people are doing better by dealing with us than if they hadn't. Sure, that's true, but that's a really low bar. And so what are the alternatives? What could they get for what price elsewhere? And that's the question. And that's what's so skewed and I think out of whack with the banks, is that they deliver less value. They're out of all the value that is created, they're extracting most of it for themselves.
Well, and if we're talking about, I think I've made this analogy before, but if you're talking about a word like health instead, and you're saying, somebody's going to McDonald's every day and they're feeding them, although McDonald's has better food all the time, they're working on their menu. But like, let's say you go into a place that just sells Twinkies and you're like, I'm hungry, and they're like, well, eat enough, all the Twinkies you want, and then you can leave and you're full of Twinkies, and you're like, well, we're feeding people. But the mandate is wrong. They're better off. They left full. Right. And you're like, but when you put it into a wider context of health, you're clearly not, you're exactly like you said, your bar is too low.
Right.
But, it's
clearly, that's a great analogy. I like that.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the things that you look at in people's, we talked about this, I think it was last season, we talked about how net worth is more than just the things that we own. It's all of the tools that we have at our disposal, whether we live close to family and have, childcare available to us. I don't. But that might be an asset that you would like, ideas like kind of looking at a bigger picture than just kind of a traditional balance statement. So one of the things that I found really, really interesting in the conversation that you and I had the first time we met was this component, the thing that you're leading into, in a sense, with financial planning is the other things that people have at their disposal to do the things they want to do in their lives and in the world. So tell us.
Yeah. So I kind of stumbled into that kind of backwards because by the kind wealth, what I'd wanted to do was with Eden Valley Partners was one of the things aside from just bringing a more sophisticated approach to the investment side was let's help people with their philanthropy. And that came from my wife, and meeting her changed my worldview. I was a very, very selfish person for most of my life. Meeting her fundamentally changed me. I spent a bunch of time in Africa. It's a very cliche story of a rich white guy going to Africa and then comes back talking about who changed he was by the experience. But like that happened. That just is true. So it's a cliche, but whatever. I'm going to own it. And so when I made this switch, it was like, hey, how can I help people give to charity? Because not enough people are talking about that, and there aren't a lot of advisors who focus on that.
Yeah.
Not only helping with donations, but this idea of like, hey, what causes really matter to you? So like helping you find organizations that do great work towards the causes you care about. But then like, hey, maybe you don't have a lot of money to give, but maybe you've got time and skills and you're an expert in digital marketing. And I bet you there's probably, hundreds of Canadian charities who need a lot of help with their social media or their digital marketing, right? So like, hey, maybe I'll, volunteer my time or sit on a board or whatever. Like I want to help people connect to the causes they care about. And that got into, hey, like, yeah, right. This idea of there are things that matter to me beyond just growing my net worth as much as possible. And the things that have made me happiest in my life have had nothing to do with money and have had all to do with kind of purpose and meaning and doing what I think is right. And so I just feel like there have to be a lot of people like that where they would benefit from somebody who sat down and as they're talking about their money issues and getting into very personal discussions around their hopes and fears and goals and dreams and, intimate details around their family. And I mean, you often act as a bit of a therapist. I mean, I think you guys probably know that. And so, hey, this is a great opportunity. We've already got this trust. We can talk about these types of issues. And so then I started to think more and more about just financial life planning, which is more than just, connecting to causes. It's thinking about your values and how they relate to money. And are you doing with your money those things that are making you happy and meeting your values rather than just doing what everybody else does, which is save, grow, and then retire and then spend it. That's fine. And I think that underpins probably most people's long-term strategy, but it doesn't have to be so formulaic and cookie cutter.
And I love values-based planning. I think it's, I'm more arty-farty than numbers, and so it gets me all excited. But it's
Yeah.
I love the idea too of basing a financial plan on giving money away and then giving resources away and acknowledging that, money, time, energy, you have multiple kind of tools to kind of feed those passions and feed those things that you love, and that's a huge rate of return that we don't have metrics to measure yet again.
My goal of all this, I'm kind of using financial planning as an excuse to get in front of people and help them connect with causes that matter to them, because I want to affect positive change at scale. I kind of, when I met my wife and saw all these issues, I thought to myself, like, I don't want to go to another Habitat for Humanity build, because like, not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm useless with a set of tools. So that's like going to be a fun experience for me, but I'm not going to be adding much value. And so I thought, how can I use my skills to affect change? And so this was a 6 or 7 year process to figure that out. And I'm figuring it out with Kind Wealth. And the idea is like, if I can help other people connect to causes, like if you realize you want to be involved, it takes a long time to figure out how and like find your lane. And I want to speed that up for people and help them. And I've got a lot of connections in the charitable world. And I know a lot about what opportunities exist. So I can speed up that process for anybody who's interested. So I kind of want to use financial planning as the front door to like get in the back door with, hey, let's talk about how you like what matters to you. What are you passionate about? Great. Do you want to affect that? Do you want to, contribute to that? Do you want to fight for that? Great. If you have like time, money, or investments, like the impact investing side of things too is a place I'm curious whether we can use impact investing as the gateway to get people to start donating more. Most people are sort of thinking the opposite, like, hey, if you're donating, maybe you'll take some of your investment money as well and invest it in causes that matter to you. I sort of think about the investment is the easier sell because you don't have to give away the money. You're going to get it back plus a return. If you can get people excited and connected to causes and feeling good about what they're doing there, maybe then you can sort of unlock the donation side too. Like, hey, that feels really good, doesn't it? Imagine what we could do if you gave us the money rather than just invested it and then received it back, right?
Plus, it's a way to get familiar with it too, right? Like if the fear is, well, often the fear is, well, I don't know, they're going to use it, whatever. But if you've been an investor, even in kind of a small capacity, and started to get a front row seat in what's happening and who the players are, then giving money doesn't seem like as big of a leap, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in if that plays out. I don't know if it will, but I'm curious.
I think
so
that the line and the mandate of affecting positive impact at scale is such an exciting thing. That is such an interesting, and I honestly think it's going to play.
You're just about to say disrupt.
No, I wasn't. Although that would have been great. Better than this is like heat wave brain mush. But I think that especially with the millennial generation, and you can't whitewash, but the idea of making your money speak is such a resonating factor, and that's going to play really well. I think people are going to be really excited about that.
There are a lot of ways that you can, like, so one of the taglines I kind of use for Kind of Wealth is like helping people manage their money in a way that matches their values. And so the idea is like, there's a lot of ways that you can. So one is that you can spend your money on things that match what you prioritize, and oftentimes we don't do that. I think that's firmly in kind of the life planning space, right? Like, what matters to you? What's important to you? How are you though spending, investing, and like using your money? Does that match? So you say like your family's important to you, but you're spending all your time at work and you're putting all your money in investments and you're not taking any family trips. Like you could have a conversation that's squarely in the life planning like sweet spot. But more than that, it can be like, hey, you say that, so we know that, and the environment's really important, and or I don't know, whatever your causes are, whatever things are important to you, like okay, great,
research, like a really like top level.
What's that?
Sorry, I have a conflict of interest in that regard. So.
He wants people to give money to health research because he writes, that's his field.
Oh, right. Yeah, so like that might be one for you. But like, so these are the things that matter to you. Like, okay, so let's say the environment, right? Okay, well, so maybe it's an issue of, so socially responsible investing can come to the fore, or maybe it's, hey, like think about, you're purchasing from, this company, or you use this service or this company. Maybe it's spending your money in different places and just talking about that as a conversation, not telling them where they can and can't buy, but like thinking about, okay, like you can direct your money where you do and don't buy things can be aligned with your values. And then the impact investing side is, okay, now your investments are all open for not just like SRI. I don't know how much you guys know about impact investing, but it like socially responsible investing is like, hey, just don't buy these certain stocks or buy these ones because they are better, more responsible companies. Impact investing is a completely different investment, that where charities or any organization, NGOs that are doing good work, take the money for some period of time, use it to do something good, and then pay you back that money plus a return. So this is like, SRI is very defensive, right? Like, let's screen out those bad things. I don't want them getting my money. You can go a little bit offensive by like, hey, I'm going to direct a little more money to these types of companies. But it's typically like you still are buying just companies that are for-profit companies doing whatever it is that they're doing to generate shareholder value. Impact investing is, no, this money is going to be taken. We're going to use it to like reduce the transmission of HIV/AIDS in South Africa over the next 5 years. And then I'm going to get that money back plus a return on it. And there's risk associated with it and all that. But like, it's very offensive. The connection to like, hey, my money is doing something that matters is much, much stronger. But all of these are tools. So none of these are like, hey, this is right for everybody. It's like, what's important to you? What resources do you have? And in what ways do you want, to affect the causes that matter to you? And there are a lot of ways to do that, and most people don't think about it strategically. So building that into the process, I think, is what I'm excited about.
I really think that we need to do a whole nother hour on impact investing. Honestly, like
Sure,
that.
yeah.
No, for real. For real.
That is something
It's a cool topic.
I have never heard anybody talk about before. I've been completely underwhelmed by SRIs in general to kind of fulfill
Yeah.
the mandate of
Me too.
putting your money in and making it match. I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
it
to make
really
it
does seem
mandate.
like, oh, these are okay and these are
Right.
bad. You're like, now I don't feel
Yeah.
good about any of the things I'm investing in.
Right.
You just made me hate everything. So that's really interesting. But I think with a fresh brain, perhaps.
Awesome.
Like it. All right. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Fairly
Night.
well, team. Bye.
Goodbye.
All right, that's all we've got for you today. If you liked what you heard, head over to iTunes and give us a really good rating. That really helps people find us. That would be awesome. And if you loved what you heard, why not check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/becausemoney, and lend us a little support so we can keep doing what we're doing. I am Chris Entz, and you can find me over at ragstoreasonable.com. I'd like to thank my partners in crime, Sandy Martin, who you can find at Spring Financial Planning, springplans.ca, and John Robertson, who you can find Value It's Simple or his blog, Blessed by the Potato, which is holypotato.net.